Welcome to my channel, African Tales by Dorothy. Today's story is titled The Betrayal. I want you to leave my house right now and never set foot in it again. You are a disappointment. Take your things, leave and never come back. Elia went on her knees, held her mother's knees, weeping and pleading. Mom, please forgive me. Truly, I have disappointed and brought you shame, but I am very sorry. Please don't tell me to leave. Where do you want me to park to? I don't care where you go to. Just leave my house this minute. Elia knew that her mother meant every word she said, but she was shocked and confused. Where would she go to? She muttered to herself. Mom, please, let me explain, she said, but her mother would not listen to her. Rather, she came out of her room wearing a different gown. As you can see, I'm dressed up and about to go out. I advise you to leave this house immediately, Mrs. Danjuma said to her daughter. Elia collected the suitcase from her mother and went out. Elia sat down by the gate of her compound for some hours in deep thought. How could I have been so stupid and careless? She asked herself. She was a very brilliant 100-level student at the university. She was focused on her studies until she met David, the charming 300-level student. They had met at the university's library. While talking with Elia to have a relationship with him, David promised her the moon and the stars. Elia, naive and looking for affection, agreed. On a particular evening, David invited Elia for dinner. While at the restaurant, the weather changed and a cloud showed signs of heavy rainfall. David suggested that they go to his house, which was close to the restaurant, and wait for the rain to stop. Eli agreed. While at his house, David held Elia and suggested that they seal their love. Elia, who believed that David was very much in love with her, agreed. Afterwards, David reassured Elia that nothing would happen to her. But a month later, Elia found out that she was pregnant. When she informed David, he felt concerned at first, but later changed. He started avoiding Elia. One day, she traced David to his house. David was very angry. He didn't even allow her to get inside his house. Get out of here and don't ever come near me again. He pushed Elia and she fell down. She got up from the ground and left. Back at school, the morning sickness became too much for Elia to bear. She had no choice but to go back home and tell her mother. That was why her mother, Mrs. Danjuma, felt very disappointed and told her only daughter, Elia, to leave her house immediately. As night approached, Elia knew that her mother would not open the door for her. She got up, took a taxi, and went back to the school campus. She went straight to the school's librarian and informed her about her state. Mrs. Essien listened patiently to Elia's woes. She didn't judge Elia, but told her to stay courageous and determined. She then offered Elia a room in her apartment near the school library. Mrs. Essien encouraged Elia to continue with her education and promised to pay her school fees. The university became a strange place for Elia because of the way her fellow students stared at her. But she didn't allow them to bother her. With Mrs. Essien's support, she continued with her education. Some months later, Elia gave birth to her son Andrew, and her heart was filled with joy. Mrs. Essien did everything she could for Elia and her son to be comfortable. One day, Mrs. Essien visited Elia's mother and had a long discussion with Mrs. Danjuma about her grandson, but Mrs. Danjuma refused to forgive her daughter. When Elia was informed by Mrs. Essien about the outcome of the meeting, she felt very sad and hoped that her mother would forgive her one day. Thereafter, she decided to focus on her education and son. Years later, after her graduation from the university, Elia got a very high paying job in a company. At the office, she met Joshua, who started asking her for a relationship, but Elia refused. She told him about her experience and her vow never to go into a relationship again. It's okay, Elia. I understand and will wait for you until you are ready, Joshua told her. One day, Mrs. Essien called Elia and told her to go and visit her mother. Elia took a major decision, obeyed Mrs. Essien, and went back home to visit her mother. The reconciliation was very emotional as Mrs. Danjuma forgave her daughter and carried her grandson in her arms. She told her daughter Elia to be bringing the grandson every weekend to stay with her. Everyone was very happy at the turn of things. On a particular day, Elia was invited to be a speaker at a prestigious event. At the event, she was shocked to see a familiar face. David and Elia stared at each other for about 10 minutes. He opened his mouth to say something, but Elia ignored him. David got the message. A few days later, David appeared at Elia's office. Elia, he said, "Can we talk?" Years had passed, but the hurt was still very much there in Elia's heart. "There's nothing to say to you, David," she replied. His face was very sad. "Please," he pleaded, "just a few minutes." "All right, be fast about it," Elia replied him. David fumbled for words. He spoke of regret, of the emptiness in his life. He had married 2 times, but the 2 marriages had failed, and he could not have a child of his own with the women he married. "Please, I learned that he had a son for me. Can you kindly allow me to meet with my son?" "David," Elia replied, "you had your chance. You chose to walk away. Now I have built a beautiful life for my son and I, and you have no part in it." "I want our son and also want to marry you," David said. "Really? I begged and pleaded with you to give my child a name. I came pleading on my knees, but still you didn't listen to me. Today, when I don't need your support anymore, you are here?" She then stared at David for 5 minutes and said, "Now get out of my office before I call the securities on you." David tried to plead again, but saw the look on Elia's face. He knew that everything was too late. His life would forever pay for his mistakes. He left Elia's office looking very sad. That evening, Elia went to Joshua's house, held him and said, "Can you do the proposal again?" Joshua, filled up with joy, held her and said, Wow, this is the best thing I've heard today. With all pleasure, I will do so. My beautiful lady, will you be my wife and allow me to be the father of your son? Yes, I will, Elias said. Thank you very much for your patience and understanding, Joshua. Moral lessons of the story: mistakes can happen to anyone in life. When it happens, don't allow it to keep you down. Get up and make lemonade out of your lemons. Elia made a mistake, but it's good that she made something great out of her life. Secondly, karma has no menu. You get what is served, and the consequences of our actions might not always be immediate. David in the story got what he deserved. We have come to the end of today's story. I hope you enjoyed the story. Hope to see you in the next one. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, like and comment about the story. Thank you very much for your support.